3,000 years ago, an entire city vanished from history so completely that the world forgot it had ever existed. No invasion burned it, no earthquake buried it, no ancient historian recorded its fall. And yet, beneath the silent sands near Luxor, just a few feet below the desert surface, a vast urban center, once alive with craftsmen, officials, and royal industry, remained perfectly preserved, waiting for the modern world to stumble upon it. In September 2020, archaeologists led by renowned Egyptologist Dr. Zahi Hawass began what they believed would be a routine excavation, searching for traces of a long-lost temple tied to the reign of Pharaoh Amenhotep III. What they uncovered instead forced historians to rethink everything they thought they knew about Egypt's golden age. As workers carefully brushed away layers of sand baked by centuries of desert sun, rows of ancient mud bricks began emerging from the ground. At first the walls appeared ordinary, perhaps the ruins of a small structure. But the deeper the excavation went, the stranger the picture became. The walls stretched farther than expected. Then more walls appeared, doorways, corridors, entire streets. Within days, the team realized they had uncovered something astonishing. Not a temple, not a palace, but an entire city frozen in time. A city abandoned almost overnight at the height of one of the most powerful empires in human history. Today, archaeologists call it the Lost Golden City, and its discovery may prove to be the most important archaeological breakthrough since the tomb of Tutankhamun. But the greatest mystery is not that this city existed, it's how something so large, so advanced, and so central to a mighty civilization could disappear from human memory for 3,000 years without leaving a trace. For generations, archaeologists believed the land between the Valley of the Kings and the great temples of Luxor had already surrendered its greatest secrets. This stretch of desert had been explored for more than a century, combed by scholars, survey teams, and excavation crews searching for the final echoes of Egypt's golden age. Many experts quietly assumed that the era of truly monumental discoveries was over, that whatever remained of the new kingdom had either already been uncovered or had long since crumbled back into the dust of history. Yet the desert has a way of guarding its stories with a patience that human certainty rarely anticipates. In September 2020, a team led by Egyptian archaeologist Dr. Zahi Hawass arrived at a site near Luxor with a modest objective: locate the remains of a mortuary temple associated with Pharaoh Amenhotep III. It was expected to be a routine dig, the kind that rarely makes international headlines. Workers began clearing away layers of compacted sand under the intense Egyptian sun, carefully brushing the ground inch by inch, following the quiet discipline that defines archaeological work. Then the first unexpected sign appeared: a line of ancient mud bricks emerging from the soil. At first glance, it looked like little more than a collapsed wall, perhaps the outer boundary of a forgotten building. But as the team expanded the trench, the wall continued farther than expected. Another wall appeared beside it, and then another. Soon, entire rooms began to reveal themselves beneath the sand. What initially seemed like a single structure rapidly unfolded into something far larger. Streets began to take shape, doorways aligned along narrow corridors. Patterns of construction suggested organization planning, something deliberate. Standing in the middle of the excavation site, the archaeologists slowly realized they were not uncovering a ruin, but the edge of something far more extraordinary, the first visible traces of a lost city, one that had slept beneath the desert for 3,000 years. As excavation continued, the true scale of the discovery slowly began to emerge, and with it came a realization that sent a quiet shock through the archaeological team. What had first appeared to be the remains of a few ancient walls was rapidly transforming into something far more extraordinary. Beneath the sand was not a single structure, but an entire urban landscape, carefully planned, meticulously organized, and astonishingly well preserved. Streets began to reveal themselves, cutting through clusters of mud brick buildings that had remained untouched for nearly 3 millennia. Entire neighborhoods appeared as the sand was removed layer by layer. Some walls still stood nearly 10 feet tall, their surfaces hardened by centuries of desert heat, as if the passage of time had somehow paused around them. Walking through the site felt less like studying ruins and more like entering a place that had simply been left behind. Doorways still framed the entrances to homes, Narrow alleys connected courtyards where families once gathered. Storage rooms, living quarters, and workspaces remained arranged in patterns that reflected deliberate urban planning rather than random growth. But one detail puzzled researchers immediately. Along several of the main streets ran unusual zigzagging walls, curved, bending structures that seemed almost alive in the way they snaked through the city. This architectural style is rarely seen in ancient Egyptian settlements, and its purpose remains a topic of debate among scholars. Some believe the zigzag design may have strengthened the structures against desert winds, while others suspect it may have controlled access between districts or created shaded areas within the narrow streets. Whatever the reason, these winding walls revealed something profound. The city had been built with intention, not improvisation. Every turn of the street, every courtyard, every doorway suggested a living system once filled with movement, conversation, and daily life. Slowly, the archaeologists realized they were not just uncovering ruins, they were walking through a city frozen at the very moment its people vanished from history. As the excavation pushed deeper into the city, the discoveries began to shift from architecture to something far more intimate, the quiet evidence of everyday life. For centuries, most knowledge about ancient Egypt had come from temples and royal tombs, places built to glorify gods and immortalize kings. But here, beneath the desert sand, archaeologists were encountering a different story entirely, one told not through monuments of power, but through the simple objects left behind by ordinary people. In the southern sector of the settlement, researchers uncovered what appeared to be a massive food preparation area. Rows of clay ovens lined the ground, their rounded openings still visible despite thousands of years of burial. Nearby stood enormous ceramic storage vessels large enough to hold substantial supplies of grain and other provisions. When archaeologists examined the ovens more closely, they found traces of charcoal still embedded in the clay, along with remnants of ancient grains that had somehow survived the passage of time. These were not small domestic kitchens, but large-scale cooking facilities capable of feeding hundreds of workers and officials each day. Among the pottery fragments scattered across the floor, one discovery stood out immediately. A large clay jar carried an inscription written in clear hieratic script. The text recorded the name of a butcher called Havi, along with a note that the meat stored inside had been prepared for the Heb-Sed festival of Pharaoh Amenhotep III, a ceremonial celebration marking the renewal of a king's power. It was a small detail, yet profoundly revealing because it connected this quiet kitchen directly to the rhythms of royal authority. In nearby rooms, archaeologists uncovered bone needles used for sewing stone weights that once hung from weaving looms, delicate amulets worn for protection, and even small toys that likely belonged to children who once played in the narrow streets outside. Each object carried the faint imprint of a human life, moments of work, care, routine, and family that unfolded here thousands of years ago. Together, they transformed the site from a collection of ruins into something far more powerful, a living portrait of an ancient community at the height of Egypt's golden age. As archaeologists moved farther into the northern districts of the settlement, the character of the city began to change in a striking way. The quiet traces of domestic life gradually gave way to something far more dynamic, the unmistakable signs of organized production. This section of the Golden City revealed itself as the industrial engine that once powered the luxury economy of the Egyptian court. Inside a network of carefully arranged buildings, researchers discovered workshops where skilled artisans had once worked with remarkable precision. The floors of these rooms still held fragments of tools and molds used to craft delicate objects that would eventually find their way into royal palaces and sacred temples. Clay casting molds bearing the shapes of scarab amulets, sacred symbols of protection and rebirth, lay scattered beneath layers of dust. Nearby, small figurines of deities were being formed from faience, a brilliant glazed material prized throughout the ancient world for its luminous color. Even more striking were the signs of advanced craftsmanship hidden within these workshops. Archaeologists uncovered evidence of glassmaking and fine decorative production technologies that required specialized knowledge and careful control of heat and materials. Such discoveries suggested that this city was not simply a place where people lived. It was a place where the wealth of an empire was transformed into objects of beauty and power. Precious materials from distant regions, gold, semi-precious stones, pigments, and metals, would have been delivered here, entering a carefully managed chain of production overseen by royal officials. Within these walls, artisans shaped raw resources into jewelry, ceremonial ornaments, and sacred objects destined for the highest levels of Egyptian society. Standing in the quiet remains of these workshops, it is impossible not to imagine the sounds that once filled these rooms, the rhythm of tools striking metal, the glow of furnaces in dimly lit interiors, and the steady hands of craftsmen whose skills served a civilization at the height of its influence. Here, hidden beneath the desert sand for 3,000 years, lay the industrial heart of a golden age. Yet as the excavation continued, not every discovery within the Golden City spoke of prosperity and order. Beneath the quiet geometry of its streets and workshops, archaeologists began encountering evidence that raised deeply unsettling questions. In several houses, researchers uncovered human remains buried directly beneath the packed clay floors of living spaces. This finding immediately puzzled experts because such a burial practice sharply contradicts traditional Egyptian customs. In ancient Egypt, the dead were typically laid to rest in cemeteries or carefully prepared tombs far from the places where the living carried out their daily routines. The idea of burying a body inside a home would have been considered highly unusual, even disturbing. Yet here, beneath what once were ordinary rooms, a human skeleton lay positioned in a way that suggested something irregular. Perhaps a hurried burial, perhaps a ritual whose meaning has long been lost to time. The mystery deepened when archaeologists began uncovering the remains of large animals in nearby rooms. The bones belonged to cattle, valuable animals that were essential to agriculture and food supply in ancient Egyptian society. Their presence beneath residential floors defied easy explanation. Were these animals sacrificed as part of a protective ritual meant to guard the household? Were they buried during a sudden crisis that forced residents to abandon established burial traditions? Or could they represent a symbolic act tied to beliefs we no longer fully understand? Each possibility only deepens the intrigue. Even today, scientists continue analyzing soil samples and conducting DNA studies in hopes of uncovering clues hidden within the remains. For now, however, these discoveries add a darker layer to the Golden City's story, reminding us that beneath every flourishing civilization lie mysteries that refuse to surrender their secrets easily. To understand why such a vast and thriving city once stood here, and why it was ultimately abandoned, we must turn our attention to the powerful ruler who first brought it to life. Pharaoh Amenhotep III governed Egypt during what historians often describe as the Golden Age of the New Kingdom. His reign was marked not by relentless warfare, but by extraordinary prosperity, diplomatic influence, and ambitious construction projects that transformed the landscape of the Nile Valley. Gold from the mines of Nubia flowed steadily into Egypt, fueling a period of wealth that allowed the pharaoh to commission magnificent temples, vast palace complexes, and new urban centers designed to support the expanding machinery of royal power. The city, now emerging from the sands near Luxor, appears to have been one of these creations, a carefully organized hub where artisans, officials, and laborers worked together to sustain the grandeur of the royal court. Within its walls, the economic and administrative life of an empire quietly unfolded, supporting a ruler who sought to demonstrate stability, abundance, and divine authority. Yet the foundations of this prosperity would soon face a dramatic shift. After Amenhotep III's long reign came to an end, the throne passed to his son Akhenaten, a pharaoh whose vision would challenge centuries of religious tradition. Rejecting the complex pantheon that had shaped Egyptian belief for generations, Akhenaten declared that the empire should worship a single divine force, Aten, the radiant disk of the sun. This radical transformation reshaped the political and spiritual landscape of Egypt almost overnight. Determined to distance himself from the old religious centers, Akhenaten ordered the construction of a completely new capital at Amarna. As power and attention shifted toward this new city dedicated to Aten, the once bustling settlement near Luxor lost its central role. Gradually, or perhaps suddenly, its people departed, leaving behind the silent streets that archaeologists are only now rediscovering. Today, as archaeologists continue to uncover the silent streets of the Golden City, it is becoming increasingly clear that this discovery represents far more than another chapter in the long history of Egyptian archaeology. For centuries, our understanding of ancient Egypt has been shaped largely by monumental temples, royal statues, and the elaborate tombs of pharaohs, structures designed to project power and eternity. But the city emerging from beneath the sands of Luxor tells a different, more intimate story. It reveals the living machinery of an empire, the craftsmen who shaped gold into sacred ornaments, the bakers who prepared food for hundreds of workers, the scribes who recorded deliveries and supplies, and the families who built their daily lives within the protective walls of a thriving urban community. Here, history is no longer confined to kings and gods. It belongs to ordinary people whose quiet routines sustained one of the greatest civilizations the world has ever known. Yet what makes the Golden City even more astonishing is how much of it still remains hidden. Only a small portion of the settlement has been excavated, while vast sections continue to rest beneath layers of desert sand. Somewhere beneath that silent surface may lie papyrus archives, administrative records, or diplomatic correspondence that could illuminate the political and religious upheavals that reshaped Egypt during the reign of Akhenaten. Each new excavation may reveal another fragment of a story that has remained buried for 3,000 years. And perhaps that is the most powerful lesson this city offers. Even the mightiest civilizations can fade into silence, their streets forgotten, and their voices lost, until one day the earth decides to remember them again. The Golden City reminds us of something both inspiring and unsettling. Even the most powerful civilizations can vanish from memory. 3,000 years ago, this place was alive with voices, industry, ambition, and the quiet routines of everyday life. It supported an empire that believed its greatness would last forever. Yet history shows us a different truth. Prosperity can fade, systems can change overnight, and what once seemed permanent can disappear beneath the sands of time. For modern society, the lesson is clear: civilizations are not remembered because they were powerful, but because their knowledge, culture, and stories were preserved and passed forward. The Golden City survived because it was buried, protected by silence until the moment we were ready to rediscover it. What lessons from our own time will survive for the future to uncover? If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of history's greatest discoveries, make sure to like the video, share it with someone who loves history, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next hidden story waiting beneath the sands of the past.